I was back to sixth grade. I mean, I've done a whole book, left hand lead, left foot lead, but when you completely lose this hand, and it's the right hand too, that's the common denominator, the hand in charge of everything. And so I'm working out how do I play these songs where it doesn't sound like something's missing. I'm coming up with new grooves and having to formulate all kinds of stuff, and I worked at it. And I got better and better at it, oddly enough, where, I was actually, what's stupid or ridiculous about me? At one point, I said, you know what? I'm going to be the best one-handed left drummer this world's ever seen. Really? I was like, again, that's just how I'm wired.
Yeah, yeah. You're like, hey, Rick Allen, here I
Yeah,
come.
not that anybody said that. I was like, I'm going to do this right.
Greetings, I'm Mark Riley, and welcome to the Washington Tattoo Podcast, where the world's musical traditions come to life. The Washington Tattoo is an international music and arts festival coming to the Washington, D.C. metro area. Our podcast explores the lives and stories of world-renowned musicians, dancers, producers, choreographers, artists, educators, arts advocates, and those who serve our cultural communities at large. For more information and donations, find us at www.thewashingtontattoo.com. Now, please enjoy this episode of the Washington Tattoo Podcast, sharing the power of the arts, one story at a time. All right, greetings, everybody. Today we have Bill Bachman, who is an international performer, clinician, composer, arranger, and all-around incredible human being. Bill, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Pleasure.
Bill's worked with some incredible ensembles throughout his career: the Cadets, Blue Knights, Carolina Crown, Magic Orlando, and tons of other drum corps. Bill has also studied at the Berklee College of Music in Boston, as well as the University of North Texas. Bill is an author of the Roll-Off production Rudimental Logic, Quad Logic, and Bass Logic books. He's the designer of Vic Firth's Heavy Hitter Pad series and is a contributing writer for Modern Drummer magazine. Bill is an endorser / clinician for Remo drum heads, Zildjian cymbals, Vic Firth drumsticks and mallets, Roll-Off productions, and erasers and in-ears earplugs. Bill, you and I have been friends for a long time now, and it's a blast to have you on here. And quite honestly, I'd love to just kind of dig into your story.
Cool. Thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure. So yeah, if I can be of service somehow, I'm all for it.
Awesome.
People are probably going to actually watch this thing, which is crazy.
Well, just two drummers kind of hanging out and
Yeah.
talking about stuff and getting better and giving back, right?
Yeah. It's always neat because some people have their ideas about you. Everybody they form their own perception of who you are and what you do and what you must be like. And then they sort of project that onto you. But then you meet the actual person and you're either completely devastated or it's like, whoa, he's actually cool and kind of zany. So yeah, it works out. It's fun to be here and talk to people and see what's going on. So thanks
Awesome.
for having me. It's always a pleasure. You
Like,
do good things, so I'm all for it.
thanks, my friend. So you know me, I'm always trying to figure out what makes people tick, and I always like starting off with this first question. But when you were younger, when you first got that spark, who would you say your first inspiration was and why?
Absolutely Phil Collins. And I just heard I was really, really lucky that my best friend's mom was into Genesis and she got us, copies of tapes of Genesis. So my first exposure was Abacab. And then I headed back to the Peter Gabriel era and just found some absolute gold. And I started playing, oddly enough, when I was in fourth grade. They had the older kids come in, well, third grade, and older kids came and demonstrated the instruments. And I thought the clarinet was the bomb. I just loved the way it sounded. I was like, man, I want to play the clarinet. That's cool. And then we go to the music store, and there's a clarinet on display with, like, I picture a blue velvet cushion and a glass case with a clarinet and, all these lights on it. all these bells and whistles, and it looked like a confusing mess. And sitting next to it was a snare drum with two sticks. Like, oh, that looks easy. I'll just play that. So that's the only reason I ended up playing drums at all, which is anticlimactic. But that's what really gave me the spark is hearing Phil Collins play. There's just something about it. It was aggressive. You could tell it was just physical and intense, almost like music meets sport. And I loved that challenge and the rush it gave me. And so the younger we are, the more of a blank slate we are. So the more impact any influence is going to have on us. And I can listen to certain grooves off Abacab, and it's like, oh wow, that nuance right there, that's still a part of my playing. There's a just a quick example. There's a song called Another Record on there, and it's like, and that little hi-hat accent on three, it's like, oh, like that's where all the sauce is. That nuance right, boom. And so I can go back and just go through tons of records and say, oh, that's where I learned that. It's like, oh, that's I still play that stuff. And what I thought, the strangest thing is when I go back and listen to the same stuff I was listening in middle school, the, I would basically learn what he was doing, but I was not fully geeked note for note. But the things that I would imagine myself, ooh, this would be cool to play right there, I still play those same things, and I still look at those and say those are the right musical ideas. So it's not something that I thought you might think you'd grow out of as your tastes mature and whatnot. It's like, no, I loved it then, I love it now, and that's okay. That ain't broke.
I love that. I mean, because it's something that's really not all that complicated. It's this one little tasty thing, and it sticks with you, and that impact of just that little taste, that's the
Yep.
flavor, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's like the nuances of things. The older you get, you get wiser, and you tend to appreciate what may seem like the simpler things. And when I was younger, I was a bit of an I didn't know enough to know what I didn't know, so I was a bit of an arrogant punk. And he's like, I wanted, fast, intense, crazy, and that there's nothing wrong with that. That's still good, and I still love that. But when you listen to a couple people play Boots and Cats, so Boots and Cats and Boots and Cats, there's a certain nuance to it where everybody sounds different, and there's absolute beauty in the minutia of note placement and the way it affects the feel. And then rudimentally, when I look at, I can watch someone play something and there's a certain touch and musicality where it can be the simplest thing, but there's an absolute beauty to it. So whereas before, like how many more flams can I fit on that and how fast can it go? Now, it's like the last PASIC. I came in and Kevin Dill, right? He's just hacking on a pad on the table, and I'm just watching it. Like that is absolute poetry in motion. I don't think anybody with two sticks could sound any smoother than that. And it wasn't virtuoso vocab or speed. It was just absolutely fantastic and musically mature, coming from a place of absolute confidence.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and later that weekend, it's like, oh, we sort of bonded a bit. I was like, by the way, when I walked in and you played that, I was like, that couldn't have been done any better. That was absolutely beautiful. For whatever that's worth coming from me, just that was fantastic.
Well, and I love that too. So, Bill and I always meet up at Percussive Art Society International Convention held in Indianapolis, and we've gotten to the point now where we go to these, conventions each year, and really we start to bond with, the multiple generations of drummers that are there. Yeah, some of the old school guys from the 50s, 60s, 70s. Then you have the generation of like the 80s, 90s guys, and then you start meeting the folks that are from the 2000s plus. And I mean, you're seeing kind of all the different generations. A lot of the folks that are still playing in the game are all there hacking and having fun. But quite honestly, what's so fun about it is that most of the people that you run into, almost all of them, are just good people, and they're super incredibly talented. and they're just like, hey, let's grab something and let's grab a pair of sticks and let's go play together.
Yeah. I think anybody who's really good at something, they kind of know how bad they actually suck at plenty of things. So they
It's
know enough
yeah,
enough.
please let me be good at this one thing because I'm really bad at all this other stuff.
Yeah. You know, that's we live in the world of percussion, which it's totally unfair because if you play the saxophone, maybe you can double on the flute and this and that, but most people play an instrument, and there's this idea that we're supposed to be good at everything. And some people get all highfalutin and you have to be vert, you have to be so like yeah, learn all you can about everything and that's always going to be good, but at some point you got to kind of be realistic because if you try to be all things to all people you can very quickly become nobody to anybody.
Interesting.
you know
Yeah, you're
if
right.
I need, if my heart goes down, I'm not going to a general practitioner, right? There's nothing wrong with specializing in something and just doing what you love and excelling at it.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah, and
yeah,
I mean, I understand like a lot of music educators, we talk about it, like be able to market yourself, brand yourself, and then as your path is going, that student's going to have to make a choice on, where they want their career to go. And that's usually, I guess, the timeline of when that decision starts to, I guess, really become more focused.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I loved playing marimba for 20 minutes, maybe a half an hour, and then I would just start to get so frustrated because I mean it's hard. It's a beautiful instrument and it's cool, but me personally, I'd be a hockey player before a marimbist,
Hmm.
and it's one of those things where hey, that's okay. I know things. I'm a musician with an ear. I kind of know what's good and bad and why. But you kind of have to be within reason. Kind of
Right.
like I do a ton of drum set stuff, and everybody just preaches, oh, you got to have all styles, you got to know all these things, you got to be fluent, and because one night you're going to be playing a bebop gig, and the next night it's heavy metal, and it's like, how many people actually do that?
Hmm.
I mean, there's Vinny, but Vinny's not really human. You know, it's basically people who've made a mark and had an impact and had some success and are able to do it. They generally pretty well specialize in something.
It's funny you say that because luckily last year a few of us from the old guard got to go out to Wolf Trap and we got to meet up with Vinny because he was playing
Did
with
Vinny
Bernie.
fanboy you? Did that really happen?
I don't know if fanboy or is the right word, but yeah, he's a fanboy of the old guard and the Hellcats. He loves the groups,
Yeah. Okay.
and it was really cool because I mean, Vinny and I after that we just connected as people,
Yeah.
and he's an incredible human being, and we were just kind of talking about. The gig that night, we loved how he's playing, and he's like, "Oh, this was actually probably the worst gig I've had in months." And we're like, you know what? You couldn't tell. And the thing is, it's that idea of like he's so well versed on his fundamentals
Hmm.
that you can never really see or hear his mistakes, only because he knows them and he knows what his fundamentals are because he's so spread across all the different styles that his ear is just so incredibly mature and his hands, and his hands, his feet, his ears, it's all kind of there. And I mean, you're right. He's superhuman. And what's really cool about it is he's a great person. And I thought that was kind of the icing on the cake with all of it. It's that whole thing you talked about earlier. You hear about somebody, you project this image on somebody, and then it turns out like, wow, they if they really wanted to not be a nice guy, if they really wanted to be a jerk, they could because they could back it up. But the best performers I've learned to notice is that they're all really good people, and that's always really heartwarming for me.
Yeah, that is cool. That's that's a professionalism 101. Just be cool, basically. When I was in Nashville, it's funny because everyone's like, "Oh, I was in Nashville, doing studio sessions." Everybody just loved busy, 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 like the phone ringing. They love to paint this stupid picture and just sort of play pretend. But I would generally end up in a studio about once a month, and it's usually someone's demo. And I might have gotten paid a couple times, which is pretty cool. But the thing I noticed is the further up the food chain I got, the more friendly and cool everyone is. So if you know things, you know you are going to get the best performance out of somebody if they feel welcomed and respected and wanted. And
Yeah.
so the warmth always went up the higher up the food chain you went, because these are professionals that know what it takes to get the best possible product out of people.
Yeah, I love it. And that actually leads perfectly into the next question. So, I mean, I know like you're a huge proponent of service and, you know, you give back to others all the time. You're involved with PAS for so many years and the different committees. And I mean, what does that do for you? Like that idea of giving back, what does that bring to your life?
Um, Fulfillment. I mean, it can sound pretty pious. Thanks for the setup. I don't know if I can live up to that. Basically, if you live for yourself and try to pump yourself up, it's chasing after the wind. It'll never work out. You'll always be bitter. And as soon as you achieve one big thing, you realize, oh, that ain't it. I need this next thing. And so a lot of people spend their whole entire lives sort of miserable and failing their ultimate sort of, well, I'll arrive when I achieve X or whatever. It never works. So if you put others first, I don't think we're not put on this earth. I don't think we're not. No, I think we are put on this earth not for our own glory, but as a Christian, for God's glory. So the more you put others first and serve, you will be filled up. It's like if you have a tragedy in your life and some people just isolate, all you do is just start to smell bad and you just get miserable and depressed and it's sad. So next time your life sucks, go do something for somebody where you're going to get nothing out of it. And somehow it's like, oh, it comes back to me and I feel good. I have my worth back. So it definitely works.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's the thing too. I got to a point where I love clinicking, I love doing, teaching, I love leading. But for me, one of my favorite things is working with elementary school kids.
Of course.
And you're literally, I mean, it can be a ton of effort, but when you see that light bulb go off and those kids or come on and those
Yeah.
kids are just like, wow, I played right, right, left, left. And like, they're like completely blown away by it. There's so much power in that moment for me that it becomes kind of addictive to like see somebody take that next step. And
Yeah.
you and I have talked over the years too that I mean these silly two pieces of wood actually can do more good for humanity than so many other avenues. I mean, people will try different, political things or what. I'm not saying to not do that, but I mean sometimes it's really simple. It's really simple to take a musical instrument and put that in the hands of the kids that may have never experienced the power of music or experienced playing something with someone else. And like that to me always was that's addictive. And I love your point on this idea of like don't expect to get something back out of it because usually you
Yeah.
end up doing it.
Some people have decided I'm cool or I'm really good or whatever, and they have this idea that it's like, oh man, that's where it's at. That's what I want. But they don't realize, it's not that big a deal. I distinctly remember this idea was really encapsulated. Oddly enough, I ended up at the Grey Cup, which is the Canadian Super Bowl.
Hmm.
So they kind of wanted blast, so they called Jeff Queen. And so we had this whole bunch of homies, and I was on a drum set. And so suddenly I'm on this 6 foot riser on wheels, rolling out and bouncing, everything strapped to the floor and whatnot. Total, total dangerous. But and I even had like a 4 bar solo before the rack hack where they went nuts, and it's just me playing, just grooving as hard as I can, and there's 63,000 people around, and I was like, that's kind of cool,
Wow.
sort of
Yeah.
a big deal, I guess. I don't know. But they ruled me off of there, and when I checked my messages, I had there's my daughter saying, "Hi, Daddy, we missed you," and I was like, boom,
Yeah.
that absolutely eclipses this, potentially glorious event that some people only dream of.
Yeah. No, and I love that too because I'm a huge fan of Paul Byers' book, Working Toward Excellence. And he's got 8 values in there about just how to be good at work and life together. And work-life balance is something that people always bring up. And, it's never like, oh, if you do these 5 things, like it will all work out. No, it's that you have to somehow figure out how to manage all those 5 things or 8 things or whatever the steps would be to try to figure out, like, it is sometimes the higher priority to, maybe be an extra hour's worth of practice. Maybe it is. And other times it's not the priority because you could be missing a baseball game or you could be missing, a ballet recital. And, you're going to miss one, you're going to miss maybe even 5. But the idea is if you can keep yourself going and trying to make all those events, you will find some of that, that balance and that fulfillment, which, we talked about earlier.
Yep, absolutely. So going back a little bit, I don't know why. I didn't have a tiger mom or tiger dad. There was no one whipping me to practice, but just the way I'm wired, if you don't want to be the best in the world at something, why would you even take the first step? That's why I don't do a lot of things. I choose a few things to do and try to do them well. And my parents never ever told me to practice. I was just addicted, and I loved it. Um, yeah, after Phil Collins came Neil Peart from Rush. The first time I heard moving pictures, like, I want that. Whatever that is, I want that. And so I was always just inspired. And as a, I did BMX and drums were my main 2 things in life. And when I was in 10th grade, I pretty much, being practical, drums is kind of what I want to do for life. And so I really wanted to be the best. And I got hooked at the rudimental thing when we had a drum instructor. I came from podunk, just, I was sort of the best in this tiny little puddle, just backwoods style. But we had this senior corps guy come, and he played on tri-toms. And I was like, that's awesome. I want that. And so I got all into it. So yeah, I guess a little bit of history. I played snare drum matched grip in high school and got some decent fundamentals. And then there was a trip to Dutch Boy, Canadian Corps, up in Buffalo. And so we'd cram in a stinky little van and do this trip. And traditional grip, I had to learn it. I was like, oh, dang it. Yeah. And I worked it, but I was the last cut. And so I ended up playing top bass my first year, which was
Okay.
cool. I had 3 roles, so totally legit.
Nice.
And yeah. But anyway, I got it done, and I came home from tour that year, and I was playing my drum set, just loving playing my drum set all the time. It's like, oh, let me do some of this marching stuff. And I flipped over to traditional. It's like, this sucks. It's awkward. The drum's not, I have to do this, and then I just went match, and oh, this is easy. This makes sense. And so I was like, okay, I'll play quads. And that's the only reason I ended up being a quad player. There's no more glorious story than that. It worked out all right. I tell people I was never good enough to make it all the way up the snare.
That's hilarious. So, I mean, can you start there? So your first year marching was at 92?
91.
91. And then so after Dutch Boy, you went to cadets?
Yeah, I was actually there with Dutch Boy 92 and 93. And almost ended up at actually cadets both of those years. Almost. Kind of coulda, shoulda kind of thing. But as a kid, there was a story, there was a direction to this. I decided that I'm playing quads, so I want to be the best quad player the world's ever seen. And I worked my butt off. Given there were very, very limited resources back then compared to now, kids, that's why they're so good. But I would just work it and work it and work it. And it's a ridiculous claim. I would certainly never, ever dream of saying, I became the best there is or anything foolish like that. But yeah, so I ended up at cadets in 94, and you talk about right place, right time. All the scrapes were getting big, and it was like the place to be as far as I was concerned. So that was really, really cool. And then same thing, when I aged out after 95, I saw North Texas play at PASIC. And I was watching them play, And I thought, okay, I always wanted to be the best player ever. I wanted to march in the best line ever. I did cadets, and now there's this. Okay, I need to go to North Texas. Boom. So I literally logicked my way through it like that. And about 10 seconds of thought, it's like, I need to go do that. And so again, right place, right time, right people and situation, 96 North Texas. And it was a good time.
I heard that was a great line.
Yeah, we had some good times. Yeah, good days. And so after aging out, it's like, okay, I can no longer drum. What can I do? Well, let me try to produce the best line anyone's ever seen. So now it came about service. So it's not about me, it's about these guys and how far can I push them up. And one thing I remember, I learned this from Doc Shatroma at North Texas. He would do a thing where he was teaching us, and he would sort of kneel down, or we'd huddle up, and he would just sort of kneel down on, sit on an ankle kind of thing and talk to us, where he's looking up. It's like there was something about that where it was an absolute, not a me over you, and there was a humility and pushing everybody else up. And so I really adopted that. The videos of Blue Coast where I was teaching 96, 7, and 8, you'll rarely, not that there's that many videos, but you'll rarely see me because I would consciously stay out of the spotlight in order to give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more you build them up, things, people like that, they respond well to that. Otherwise it's like I'm using you.
Yeah.
There are people who've got their core jacket and their medals on and blah, blah, and they're getting in all the shots and being boss man. It's like, who wants to serve that guy?
Hmm.
It's like you almost want to tick just to deflate his ego, but wait, that's not the right answer.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting too. I mean, there's so many folks, and I think you said it earlier, as you grow wiser throughout your career, you start recognizing how to make those in the moment decisions and starting to figure out like, and I think there's a lot of reading into the emotion of the repetition. So if you're at a rehearsal, you're at a practice and people are beat, like you're not going to go in there and beat them more, right? You're going to figure out a way to like speak to them in the right way at that right moment, maybe give words of encouragement, give words of, uplifting. And I mean, I definitely was a guy that would always bring things to the table of, hey, I know you can play that better. Hey, I know you can do this better. Nah, that wasn't our best run. And like just kind of comments more along those lines, just like, oh, that was the worst thing I've ever heard, which I've had rehearsals where I've been told that before. And of course you're like, and do you get better because you're angry at the person, or are you getting better because you really do want the team to be successful? And I think there are definitely versions of it that work on both circumstances, but where to insert those tools, I think, is really critical if you're you want to be a productive educator.
Yeah, you got to read people and know their personality types and what'll work.
Hmm.
I've been told that recently, a couple of people, oddly enough, it's like you have a gift for absolutely just leveling me and yet leaving me totally inspired. It's like the level, the inverse proportion. It's like, well, that's cool. And teaching is a gift. Honestly, well, I'm being honest about everything here, but one thing I notice is I find it odd when people they go to get their education degree. It's like I'm going to learn how to really teach. I tend to think you kind of have that or you don't. I mean, yes, you can learn things and develop them, but yeah, you can either
Yeah.
reverse engineer and figure out why things work and why they don't, and then transfer that and get somebody in a mindset where they're going to succeed. You got to set
Right.
them up for success and then let them go run on their own.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's tricky.
Well, and I think it's interesting. I mean, you think about just principles and the basis of why principle-based leading or principle-based education really does work, because it always turns out to be they're not like flash in the pan concepts. They are historically over time. These principles work, and like serving other people is definitely a principle, right? But also the idea of fundamentals, and even the quote I've heard recently even is leadership can't be taught, but it can be learned. And that's that idea, like, you can learn it, but some people are not able to be reached when certain things are taught. And so that's always that self-reflective kind of side of things as an educator. And I always feel like my best educational moments when I know I'm on is when I walk back and I went, man, I learned how Johnny fixed his right hand or his left hand, or I know how Johnny fixed his embouchure because I said it in a way where he was open to listening to the change and to the way I was speaking with him versus it being, kind of forced down a throat. And so, and again, I think you're right. You got to read the people in the moment to get to insert the right tool. And it's like going back to the heart surgeon thing. We're all collecting tools in our toolbox. Don't come out with the sledgehammer when little Sally's not playing her part right, and you just slap her upside the head with a sledgehammer when she really needed like some real good words of encouragement.
Yeah. And yeah, I totally forgot my thought. So unprofessional, I just got a text. Can you imagine that? You know,
All right.
as a teacher, my personality, I'm more of an engineer than a artsy fartsy, open-hearted performer kind of guy. And it works out really well teaching wise because I can't I can't sleep at night if I don't know why something sounds bad or sounds good, or when you watch someone play, what is it about that that looks funny, or why does it sound a certain way? And everything is physics. The laws of nature aren't everything. Just math and form aren't everything you do. And so I just had an article in Modern Drummer about this too. A lot of people love to say, well, there's technique over here, and they tend to think speed and chops and coolness, but what about musicality? Like they get all lofty to the higher ground. It's like, no, they go together perfectly. If someone has a beautiful musical touch, it's because they're manipulating the sticks as little as possible in order to execute what they're playing. Any excessive input manipulation, and you kill the natural musicality that'll come from it. And that's all a matter of technique. So I've had people. Okay, quick story. So there's this one guy. I was at Texas A&M. I actually remember it, and I was doing a master class for the drum set thing, and there was about 25 kids, the whole studio in a semicircle, and the drum set's in the middle, and I brought up a guy to play just Billie Jean, basically, right back to Boots and Cats, and so he played it, and it sucks, and it was bad, and it's awkward because he's friends, everybody likes him, but everybody knows that was bad. And so I said, hold on a second, hold on. So you're holding the stick up here with this first finger fulcrum, and you don't need this. Your index finger is kind of your low, fast, light finesse kind of finger. And you don't need any of that. So let that hang off of there. Get rid of that. Cup it with your middle finger. Let's use muscles further back so there's less anal retention and manipulation. So I got him doing a little bit of a molar whip and flop swing on the hi-hat. Now the snare drum, don't hit the drum, let the stick hit it, right? And again, let's use muscles further back, and we did this, and within about 3 minutes later, I'll sort of reenact. I'm standing right next to him, and he plays, okay, let's hear it now. And he goes, boom, God, boom, stop, look. I like stopped him from playing and look, because all 25 people were smiling and bobbing their heads. It's like, you did not just go back in time and listen to R&B for 20 years. The technique changed, and suddenly you were out of the way, and all the musicality completely sprang forth. So that's kind of like my drumworkout.com philosophy. It's minimize your influence, maximize nature through technique, and then everything will sound better. Your touch, your feel, your groove, your consistency. And if you want speed and chops, you can't help but get that because you're doing things the easy way.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love the idea of it's science and art are meeting together and they're interwoven. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So sliding on to another question here, you definitely are still super heavily involved with education and teaching at all different levels. What would be some advice you could give folks that are trying to get into the music field? It could be, music education, it could be performing.
Know what you're getting into and make sure you really, really want it because it's hard. Um, Through the years, I've had people ask me, how do I do what you do? And I'm thinking, I don't know. You have to be in the right place at the right time and want it. You have to want it more than everybody else and work your butt off to achieve it. But there is a lot of just right place, right time. Luck, which is of course preparation meeting opportunity.
I
You know,
love that one.
what's that?
I love that one. I prescribe to that wholeheartedly.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest, I guess, game-changing moments for me that sort of made my career. I think I will actually answer the question eventually. But in WGI 2002, all I had done for the last 4 years is ride BMX. I'd moved to California so I could just ride. I'd only pick up sticks to click for the drum line and, demonstrate a thing, but, clock out, sticks gone, BMX. And so about this time, I was working on heavy hitter pads in my garage with my roommate, Chris Romanowski. And right off the bat, more on that later, but Vic Firth was interested in picking it up on day one when we debuted at PASIC, which is pretty awesome. And so WGI 2002, I was going out there, they flew us out, and I thought, oh, I'm just going to be sort of business guy in the booth demonstrating the pads pre-Vic Firth version. And then a couple days before I'm getting on the plane, this Vic Firth newsletter goes out to 30,000 odd people, back when that was the major way to reach people, that Bill Bachman and Jeff Queen will be in the booth playing solos and giving mini lessons. I was like, what? Who decided that I was some sweet chief on quads? And I had just done my first clinic and just worked up my hands enough to play two little snippets, barely. And so we didn't know this was the very start of this playing in booths kind of thing. There was no format. Now appearing from 1 to 2 will be. We just played the whole time, and this is where I realized just how tangible these skills are. I will keep up. I will play clean. So the training just takes over. Oh, one of the famous quotes I meant to say earlier is, under pressure, we do not rise to the occasion. We sink to the level of our training.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why Vinny, on his worst day, is still ridiculously great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Jeff said I was actually pushing him. I'm like, really? Like, that's pretty cool. And so Mark Wessels filmed that and put it on the internet. And so this was before internet video was a big thing. And suddenly there's the two of us, me and like the other white meat, just snare and quad sheaf, just doing our thing. And that, I think, opened the doors to a lot of stuff. So that's a lot of what I think helped snowball this weird career I have.
Hmm.
So in that way, it's hard to say what's going to make a career work other than putting your students first, not making it about you, and that. So, and then the other part of the question, during these COVID times, it's weird. Nobody knows what to do. Everybody's scrambling, and we're being resourceful, and a lot of people have figured out, oh, I got to go online and do this and that. So it's cool that everybody's sort of well, not everybody, but a lot of people have stepped up their game and tried to figure something out. But to have a career in music, you really need to diversify because you never know when your cheese is going to move.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, hardly anybody makes a living just playing music.
I love that you're bringing that up because I spoke with Joshua Simons from PAS and I asked him, one of the questions was, a lot of people when they first start playing, they're like, I'm going to play for 60,000 people at MetLife Stadium or whatever, right? And he's like, I enjoyed playing, but I really loved organizing other people getting the chance to play. And I
Yeah.
was like, that's cool. He's like, arts management was my jam. He's like, I love that. So I love you're saying the idea of diversification because you're thinking like an engineer. You play music. You have this engineering side to you. You also have a business side to you because of, building the website and everything else.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, there's so much more for folks to be a part of, which in the long term, I mean, a great music career, if you get to play professionally for 10 years on Broadway, man, that's gold. That's an amazing story. There are not many people who do that. The amount of people who get 30 to 40 years like Bill Platt at the Cincinnati Symphony, like that's like unheard of. So I mean, if you're still looking at percentages and trying to find your careers in music, education is obviously a huge piece, performing is a huge piece. Now music business is a piece. Being able to know your kind of online market, that's another piece. So, I mean, there's a lot of things, and during COVID, if you can kind of pivot a little bit to one of those couple things, you can really kind of build up maybe one side of that muscle, you know?
Yep. Yeah, when it first kicked in and we didn't know how ridiculously crazy it was going to get, I started doing stir crazy drum school where I would just, I made a Sharpie marker on a paper and I held it up as that's the title, the graphic. So, which, I mean, I have a certain bush league charm. It's like I said earlier, like semi-pro all the way.
Hmm.
Where but the quality of the service sells it, not the bells and whistles as much. But forgot where I was going with that. But yeah,
Diversifying.
diversifying. Yeah, and the other thing is, some people. Well, I guess I can teach if I need to. If I need to fall back on it, it's like you might not want to do that because if you're good at something, you're probably going to have a passion for it. And like you said about creating situations for people to succeed in music, I love when students just take off and do amazing things. I mean, I know or knew how to play a lot of stuff. I can do it, but for me to get somebody else to do it, that's way harder. So in a lot of times when I'm kneeling, like when I was teaching Blue Coats, mainly 97 and 98, those guys were pretty good. And I'm just sort of kneeling and watching. It's like, oh my gosh, this is cool.
Yeah.
This is more rewarding than just doing it myself. Because, yeah. And we've all had some musical highs where it's just incredible. But as a teacher, I get the same kind of rush from that. Like you said earlier, a certain sentence pops out. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how thorough and detailed that is, while so incredibly concise and easy to understand.
Hmm.
So I tell people, I see sometimes on the cyber webs something about Bachman technique. It's like, well, what is that? I didn't make anything up, but I did create a lot of different teaching techniques and catchphrases and strategies that I think make it a lot easier to get where people can have an accelerated bell curve of growth and improvement. So yeah, those moments are absolutely as valuable to me.
I love it because I mean I'm just looking this up right now. I mean, there's a book, Building a Life of Significance, and I think it's a John Maxwell book. I have to look it up, but I mean, it's this idea of people when they get to a certain age want to look back and on the legacy that they left or didn't leave.
Yeah.
And then you talk about the idea of service. You talk about seeing your students succeed and what that brings to your heart and your spirit. That to me, I feel like is always that next step is,
Yep.
you start to recognize that other people are going to succeed because of the gifts you've given them, which in turn, you got those gifts from someone else. So really, all we're doing is just passing on the information given to us, maybe with a little slightly different flavor, but it's all what we are given, we love to pass on.
Yep. Yeah, I started praying pretty much before lessons years ago. And occasionally, I'm just doing my thing and a lesson starts and it's like, oh, okay, help me find what do they need and how do I serve them. Or when you have a student who comes in and they're already pretty darn good, like, uh-oh, okay, let me find, bam, there it is. Okay,
Mhm.
you desperately need this, and there's a ton of stuff over here that you can't do because you're missing this tool, and this is why, and here we go.
Yeah.
And, I always explain, I have people practice things. Listen, don't do it because Bill said so. Do it because you understand the physics and the logic behind it and how it's going to make a massive difference.
Hmm. I love
So,
it.
I took apart my toys as a kid to see how they were built and what the weak spots were and what, if this breaks, it'll break here. And it's like, no, it's like, don't tell me it's solid or it works. It's like people love to, in the drum set world, somebody sort of shoves the 40 PAS rudiments down their throat. It's like, oh yeah, I need to learn these rudiments because you're supposed to. No, no, that's not a good enough reason. Don't do it. Skip it.
Hmm.
Like, okay, how about here's 12 gateway rudiments, and these are going to use all the physical hand motions necessary to play anything else under the sun. So let's just fast track you and not waste a ton of time, and let's get you those hand motions.
Yeah. And then after you built those,
It seems to be there. A stick technique. It's in there.
yeah, and I love that. I mean, and you talked about it earlier. It's like we build those fundamentals there, and then when we start to diversify, then you can start to put in those things and those hours for those 40. And I love that too, because I think it's important. I think it's important to learn rudiments. I'm a big rudimental guy, but the thing for me is when I started to recognize what the fundamentals actually were, that actually transferred to every other instrument. And then I went, well, wait a minute, now that I learned this one thing on snare drum, it actually does work on timpani. It does work. I mean, you're going to, of course, tweak a few things here and there, but there's this idea of resonance. There's the idea of your body allowing what you said, the gravity and physics to do the work. All of the R&D hours that are put into drum heads, drum shells, snares, cymbals, cymbal stands. There's a lot of R&D that goes into everything that we play, and
Yep,
it's meant to be played really in a kind of very specific way to get the maximum or best sound out of the instrument.
yep. Some people will talk to me, is this sort of drum set technique or is this rudimental drum line? That's gross. Like, it's just playing. You know, you have a stick in each hand, and you can either execute a certain idea on a certain instrument, or you can't.
Hmm.
It's kind of like, well, the pad is more bouncy than my drum. Great. But now we can develop finger control and finesse that you will never ever get if you're just playing on, a drum set snare or a tom or whatever. And, well, you got to play on the pillow. A little bit,
Hmm.
sure. But if you want finger control, you know, you'll learn how to rebound and flow and have a musical touch. And then, as much or as little rebound as a surface gives you, you'll take advantage of it. But
Exactly.
if you, but if you just hammer head onto a floor tom and that's how you man up your chops, prepare to sound stiff and gross on virtually everything else under the sun.
Yeah, I love that approach too. Because I mean, the discussion I always have is you're trying to figure out the maximum rebound of whatever surface you have,
Yep.
and that rebound may be zero, or that rebound may be 100%. And you as a player, I mean, especially if you're a gigging drum set player and you decide you're going to go to an open mic night and you're like, hey, I'm going to sit behind these drums, you don't ever want to have the craftsmen blaming their tools kind of thing. So being
Yeah.
able to like play on any surface really is a percussionist bag. And like if you're learning to play on crotales, that's going to have a different rebound than playing on a free floater. And if you're going to be playing on concert toms, it's going to have a different rebound than playing on a cymbal. So
Yep.
yeah, I really I understand why you would say, hey, for this specific instrument, here are the really specific techniques. Got it. I think that comes along with that diversification piece.
Yeah.
But as a fundamental thing, understanding how physics and rebound works on just a drum pad, like I always think the idea of pad hands is really funny to me because I go, Is it really pad hands, or is it an understanding or a lack thereof of how that pad versus the drum has rebound, and can your tools adjust to playing on the different surfaces?
Yeah. When I start clinics or first lessons with people, one of my little disclaimers is be wary of absolutes because people love their rules and their parameters. Just do these couple simple things and you'll, it's like virtually every rule is going to be broken. And so I said, keep in mind that anything I tell you is dependent on what you are playing, the tempo you're playing it at, the dynamic level you're playing it at, and the surface you're playing it on. If any one of those four things changes, my advice could be totally different.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to go back to a couple of comments you made earlier because I think this is great stuff. So
Yeah.
you've taught, you've performed all over the place. What do you have a greatest musical memory as a performer or a teacher or both?
Yes, there are three that come to mind. One is 94 Cadets playing quads, the prologue solo. And that's a situation where it was really, really, really hard. Scrapes are hard, by the way. You know, I almost wonder if people think scrapes are a little bit dated, like, you know, okay, here you go, show me. You know, and they're really hard to do really, really well. And we had a challenging solo. It was not just you could just do it. But during the day, I remember specifically finals night, and I got the dots from my buddy to come in, and I remember, you know, and right there, my brain went, oh my gosh. It's like, listen to the projection of these drums, listen to the tuning. And I think the air is thinner tonight because of the way these project. Like the level of clean where you're listening to the tuning and thinking about the barometric pressure is pretty good. And yeah, you know, threes with beef, and like, you know, the crowd goes nuts. And I was like, oh, it's on now. And, yeah, I'm like getting goosebumps. I'm getting pumped up just thinking about it. So 26 years later, it's still just one of the greatest rushes I've ever had. And we proceeded to just, the rest of that whole thing was like almost 2 minutes of just brutal note fest throwdown. And it was just clean, 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 stinging. And you're in a zone where you can just do no wrong.
That's awesome.
That's one of them. Another one I remember was North Texas 96 at PASIC. I remember the five of us walking out, and I had never been so confident in my life. You know, people, okay, we back to perception. Some people have this idea that I'm really good, and so I must think that I'm really good, but I really don't. You know, I'm plenty insecure, and my perfectionist, um, I'm such a perfectionist that if it's not right, it's like, oh, that sucked. And but this was one of the times where I just came out really, really confident. And that first lick, it was like one, two, three, and it was just stinging, reefed, and just clean. And again, that first taste, and then oh, it's on. You know, sit down, shut up. Here we, yeah, you got vibe. It is just on. And the quad solo, which really was at the top. It's pretty well-known quad solo, oddly enough, 96 North Texas. And it was at the peaks of our levels. You know, we all brought part of it to the table. So basically each person's strengths was there. And we don't all have the same strength. So some parts were harder than other people and whatnot. But we just played and just reef singles and the whole thing. And I remember Angst was judging. And the judges thing was way over there. And at the end, there's this point, and I like pointed way over there. Like, yeah, get some of that, buddy. I love that guy from Cadets. He was, you know, the guy there, for those who don't know. And so that was another one. And then the third, and this will be the final one, the third, was playing with Neil Morse So he's kind of a progressive rock icon. It's kind of like Madonna to pop music. Neil Morris that's my sort of biggest gig, so to speak. And it was one of those where it's progressive rock. Mike Portnoy, he records all the albums, and so it's just a license to go nuts. And I had 3.5 hours of progressive rock, like just floating and sorted out in my head. So, okay, the third time the 5/8 comes around, there's an extra bar of set, the things you can't screw up.
Yeah.
And the concert went extremely well. There's 450 people who are paying $70 a ticket and flying in for it, and it's that progressive rock cult level crazy.
Hmm.
And so we get to the encore, and like the last tune is just really straight ahead, just beautiful melodic. And I just remember it's like a four on the floor thing, but just the level of confidence at that point, totally out of the hot water, made it, got it done. That was like another just cloud nine experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. So, kind of rounding the bend, last few questions here. So, we all have different seasons in our life. We've talked about our ups and our downs and all that kind of stuff. So, when you're kind of in a down place or you're feeling stuck, do you have like a book or a quote or something that you would share with folks that you could kind of reflect on?
Um, there's a really good book. It's the Bible. It's not in our pop culture these days. It's not too popular, but I believe truth is truth. So there's definitely a bunch of wisdom in there that absolutely keeps me going. Where for me, it's like Jesus is the rock. The rock is solid. It's not up to me. It's not on my shoulders. No matter what happens to me, I'm going to be okay. What do you think of me? It really doesn't matter because your opinion compared to God's, sorry, you got nothing, you got nothing there. So, yeah, so there's a stroke thing happened. So it's bound to come up. About actually 11 months ago, I woke up with a just absolute dead, paralyzed right hand. And I thought I slept on it wrong, and I was waiting for the pins and needles to come through, but they just didn't. And I'm just a pretty positive, upbeat person in general. And so I wasn't too freaked out. So I went to church, and they said, uh, like, dude, you need to go to the emergency room. It was a Sunday morning, and the gal who plays percussion, she was able to jump on the kit. So they went there, and the guy said, oh, it's Saturday night palsy. You slept on a nerve, and it just usually about a week it'll be back. It's like, okay, I can deal with this. So, it's just a dead hand, and I videoed it all on Facebook because I felt like this tragedy is not about me. There has to be something worth seeing and sharing. So I kind of went public with the experience. And there's videos of me like, it moved. You see it? It moved. That level. And I remember I picked up a tube of toothpaste. I was like, watch this, watch this. And I was like, I'm picking up this tube of toothpaste and then it falls and whatnot. But see? And then I remembered a few days later, I opened the refrigerator door. Because before I'd go, I had nothing. My first week, it would have been easier if you just amputated my hand. All it was dead weight that was completely in the way of stuff. And so the morning of, I got an appointment with the neurologist, but it was 3 weeks out. And I was just doing what I could. And I talked to the girl at church who's in charge of the worship music stuff. And I say, please, by all means, I know we do excellence here. Feel free to sub in. It's all good. I think, though, I might be able to do it. And of course, she said, oh, you're doing it, which was really, really cool to have people backing me up and supporting me. And so learning how to play with the left hand, I was back to sixth grade. I've done a whole book, left hand lead, left foot lead, but when you completely lose this hand, and it's the right hand too, that's the common denominator, the hand in charge of everything. And so I'm working out how do I play these songs where it doesn't sound like something's missing. I'm coming up with new grooves and having to formulate all kinds of stuff. And I worked at it. And I got better and better at it, oddly enough, where, I was actually, what's stupid or ridiculous about me? At one point, I said, you know what? I'm going to be the best one-handed left drummer this world's ever seen. Really? I was like, again, that's just how I'm wired.
Yeah, yeah. You're like, hey, Rick Allen, here I
Yeah.
come.
Not that anybody said that. I was like, I'm going to do this right. And so I just kept doing it and growing. And about 3 weeks later, I got to the neurologist, and he said, your nerves are great. They're like hyperactive responsive. So that's when I got the MRI, and they figured out it was a stroke. And it's like, oh boy. So that hit hard. And I'm really thankful that on day one, I didn't find out, oh, I had a stroke and my hand is paralyzed. Because that'd be super hard to, stay in the saddle. I kept going. I mean, I kind of don't know how to quit, which is, that's a secret to success, by the way. And I kept doing lessons. Like, I'll figure out how to do it with one hand. I still have this left hand. Most importantly, I still have a brain that knows how to do things. So maybe I become like the one-handed Yoda. I don't know. But, I know I'm still loved. I'm still okay. That everything will be, born again, made new. So this life is temporary. I'm good. I can deal with that. I'd hate to have that happen if, from this life is all there is, and oh my gosh, if my identity is in drumming, good luck. I don't know how you handle that. And I'm very thankful that I don't know how I'd handle that. And so, yeah, I just kept working it and working it and working it. And a lot of it is, I have maroon in my blood from cadets. The work ethic there is just off the charts. And just get up, get back to it, do your exercises, figure it out, and celebrate the milestones in it. So I ended up actually getting pretty good with one hand. There's a video on YouTube of me playing. We opened for this band, Big Daddy Weave, and there's, almost 3,000 people. And I'm out there just one hand in this sucker. And it's like, yeah, it sounds pretty good. But gradually I was able to do it. And I still have a long way to go. I just put on Facebook Live my playing from last weekend. And at one point, you can see I cover something here, and I hold this up, and I actually drop the stick down further in my hand to readjust. So it's not healed. I'm not back. I'm choosing to do the things that it will do. And, 8 on a hand, I'm probably at like 130 beats a minute before I'm like using arm and stuff to get it done. So I have a long way to go. But the other day I was practicing, and I had a little moment of clarity where I couldn't do something, and part of me wanted to get mad. I'm very patient with others, not so patient with me. I'm pretty demanding. I want perfection, and I want it now.
I'm always the worst at taking my own advice.
Yeah. And so I said, hey, it's cool. It's a process. You have to be patient with the process, enjoy it, trust that you're doing all the right things. You've seen the pattern. It should come all the way back. I mean, how well designed are we that the part of my brain that controls this hand got killed, and a whole different part of my brain, just like an infant, is learning how to control this from scratch. That's incredible. I mean, that kind of mathematical, that doesn't just happen on its own.
Right. No,
Yeah.
that's awesome. So, if the current you had to give 20-year-old version of you some advice, what would you say to yourself?
Well, since you asked, I'll answer. I'd say, love the Lord God with all your heart, mind, strength. There's 2 verses that basically say that. So again, the rock is solid, and I don't have to worry about anything. The burden is light. It's not on me. So if you told the 20-year-old self where I am now, what I'm doing, it'd be probably too intimidating. It would just seem insurmountable to end up with the career I have doing what I do. But when you just serve people and try to put others first, things come back to you. Now, there's a he who does much with little will be given much more. So if you don't make it about you, things will work out. And that leads me, because I never quite finished one of my the lengthy steps of how I ended up where I was.
Mhm.
So back to teaching blue coats and whatnot, just serving others and building them up. I realized there's no quad book out there. There's nothing that tells you how to do this. And so it's like, well, I kind of know what I'm doing. I just aged out of cadets in North Texas, and it's, sort of a prominent place where, there's a certain level of competency. Um, by the way, people don't bag me because that's how I talk and think. More on that later. And so it's like, okay, quad logic. So I created this quad book. Nobody's done it. Hey, what if, boom. And then a couple years later, there's a ton of books of notes, but there's nothing out there that tells you how to play. So rudimental logic came about. There's nothing on bass drumming, so it's like, hey, first I had 3 rolls, right? Dutch Boy 91, go listen to them. And so I kind of know what I'm doing, and I also consulted a bunch of experts. I talked to about 5 guys. What do I need? What am I missing? What did I screw up? What sucks? Help me out, just to make sure I did it. And that's how Bass Logic came out. And again, these are things that are going to help people get better. It's funny because 20 some years later, I still hear these quad logic success stories, and it really blows me away. And then there was no good pads. There were 2 pads. They're both a 1/4 inch thick and mushy. Would you like 8 sides or 6 sides on your pads, sir? Like, well, neither. Let me do something. And so there was a company talking to me about doing a signature pad, and of course, my engineering self, I wanted to solve all the problems. So I made full-size quad pads, big size, small size. I did the Aki pad at the time, and here's thinner rubber, here's extra thin rubber. When I play on it, it sticks. What am I going to put on that? Drum heads, like you play on drums. So I went and got from the attic of this music store 1970s Ludwig Strider heads, bass drum heads, and just cut them up, glued them on. And I remember the first time I played my prototype on my kitchen table, I was, played, and I was half jumping up and down at what I had in front of me that works, and I was half really, really mad that it didn't exist previously, because oh my gosh, this would help me so much.
Mhm.
And so the company didn't want to do all the designs. He didn't want to do it justice. So I said, nah, I'm going to do it right. Get out of my way. I'm going to figure out a way to do this. And that's
Nice.
where the Heavy Hitter Pads was born.
That's awesome.
And then, boom, that's when all these articles started happening. And, I do have definitely a business sense about me. And when you write something and it's published, they retain the rights. So as we were getting going, I said, I can't do this anymore in the same way because I'm giving you my A game and I can't have it locked away. So and he almost like interrupted me and took over the discussion about the book. And so that's how
That's
those
awesome.
books came about. And, oh, Drum Workout, drumworkout.com. That was one I remember. I was in Nashville and I sort of got on the bed and I was talking to my wife and I said, okay, imagine this, a website where you can actually play along with people, where everything is done well and explained well, and as you play, you get coached on what to do, why to do it, and I'm also closing the wrong door, telling you, it's like, yeah, that'll work. And then it took a couple years before I found somebody, but that's how drumworkout.com was born. And when I have those people come for Skype lessons, I'm consistently shocked at the amount of mistakes they're not making. So information is cool, and there's tons of information out there, and most of it's free and bad. But when you get the information and you actually apply it correctly, it really does amazing things. So all those products were created to A, fill the void where there was nothing, and B, help people succeed.
Mm,
And when you help someone succeed, it helps you succeed.
right.
You know, right now the world is on fire. It's completely crazy. There's a lot of people just emotionally overreacting and jumping on one side of the story, and it's ridiculous. What started as, oh, well, it's this specific issue, now it's basically a Marxist agenda trying to take over. It's like, no, you don't want that. Capitalism is painted as some evil, greedy thing. It's like, no, you only succeed as a capitalist if I help you succeed. I don't win if you don't win. So that's the system, and that's why things are good. Where things get good, that's why they get good. So anyway, there's a little life lesson thought for you about that. But yeah, exactly. You serve others, and then it comes back to you, and everything just sort of works.
Hmm. No, that's great. And so, last question here. Personal, professional projects you've got rolling. I think you got a few of them now. With the book, everything else. Anything else that you're working on that we should keep an eye out for?
Um, hmm, that's another thing. I tend to keep my ideas under my hat
Okay.
until it's time for them to pop, because I want to fill the void and
Hmm.
not give the ideas away. So there are a couple things, simple ones. Eventually, there'll end up being a third book published through Modern Drummer, just because there's more output I keep in the pipeline going there. And I'm doing my best to kind of slicken up drumworkout.com, get in my studio, trying to look I want to go from semi-pro to
Hmm.
like 7/8 pro.
Hmm.
So it's not just the information and the results that sell it, but
Right.
it also, it looks a little more top notch and whatnot. I mean, it ain't broke, but
Nice.
I'm just looking to take things to the next level with that.
Well, that's awesome. So, Bill, you've been a blessing for my life, and it's been an honor to know you and an honor to always work with you. And for me, just I want to say thank you so much. Our families are friends. You and I are friends. It's been an incredible journey so far. So, I just want to say thank you for your service to the community of musicians that are out there, all the stuff you're doing. And for anyone who's interested in finding out more about Bill, you can look him up at www.drumworkout.com. Bill, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Cool. You're the man. Thanks a lot, Mark. And keep doing what you're doing. I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Greetings again, everyone. We just wanted to take a second to say thank you to Seif Studios for their creative media. If you want to find out more about Seif Studios, look them up on www.seifstudios.com. We'd also like to say thank you to our educational partner, ProLogix Percussion, American-made drum pads. They're doing a special discount code for our listeners today. So if you go to www.prologixpercussion.com and type in TWT20, you will receive 20% off your entire order. So thank you very much for tuning in today, and please check out our supporters.